Baltimore residents blame record-high murder rate on lower police presence. For the third year in a row, Baltimore, MD, has had more than 300 murders, reaching a new record of murders per number of residents in 2017. Some residents attribute the high murder rate to relaxed police patrols in the city following high-profile cases of police brutality. Officers have backed off in neighborhoods, like the one where Freddie Gray was arrested. The Rev. Kinji Scott, a pastor in Baltimore who's held positions in local city government, says the opposite needs to happen. "We wanted the police there," Scott says. "We wanted them engaged in the community. We didn't want them beating the hell out of us, we didn't want that." He's among activists who are calling for police reform to reduce the violence in Baltimore and several other high-crime cities across the U.S. that he says haven't seen change. That change begins with a conversation between the communities directly involved, Scott says. "We need the frontline police officers and we need the heart of the Black community to step to the forefront of this discussion," he says. "And that's when we're going to see a decrease in crime." Interview highlights. On the current state of community safety in Baltimore. When you think about young people who are out here facing these economic challenges and are homeless and living places that are uncertain, and you're a parent, you're scared. Not just for yourself really, but for your children. The average age of a homicidal victim in Baltimore City right now is 31 years old. We had a young man who attended one of the prime high schools, Baltimore Polytechnic Institute, Jonathan Tobash, and he was 19 years old. He was a Morgan State student. And he was killed on his way to the store. That's the state of Baltimore right now. On whether the community wanted police to back off after the death of Freddie Gray. No. That represented our progressives, our activists, our liberal journalists, our politicians, but it did not represent the overall community. Because we know for a fact that around the time Freddie Gray was killed, we start to see homicides increase. We had 5 homicides in that neighborhood while we were protesting. What I wanted to see happen was that people would be able to trust the relationship with our police department so that they would feel more comfortable. We'd have conversations with the police about crime in their neighborhood because they would feel safer. So we wanted the police there. We wanted them engaged in the community. We didn't want them beating the hell out of us, we didn't want that. On whether the high murder rate is unique to Baltimore. It's not. I lost my brother in St. Louis in 2004, just lost my cousin in Chicago. No, it's not unique, and that's the horrible thing. On whether Ferguson, the killing of Michael Brown, and the birth of the Black Lives Matter movement has brought change. The primary thrust nationwide is what President Obama wanted to do, focus on building relationships with police departments in major cities where there had been a history of conflict. That hasn't happened. We don't see that. I don't know a city Baltimore for certain we've not seen any changes in those relationships. What we have seen is that the police has distanced themselves, and the community has distanced themselves even further. So the divide has really intensified, it hasn't decreased. And of course we want to delineate the whole culture of bad policing that exists, nobody denies that, but as a result of this, we don't see the level of policing we need in our community to keep the crime down in our cities that we are seeing bleed to death. On whether he's optimistic for 2018. I am not. Because I look at the conclusion of 2017, these same cities St. Louis, Baltimore, New Orleans, and Chicago, these same black cities are still bleeding to death and we're still burying young men in these cities. I'm a preacher, I want to be hopeful, but not as it stands, no. Not until we really have a real conversation with our frontline officers in the heart of our black communities that does not involve our people who are leaders. We need the frontline police officers and we need the heart of the black community to step to the forefront of this discussion. And that's when we're going to see a decrease in crime. Emma Bowman adapted this story for the web. Copyright 2017 NPR. To see more, visit http://www.npr.org. Lauren Freyer, host. Apple had a message for its customers this past week: "We apologize. People have been angry ever since the company confirmed its software update slowed down older iPhones with aging batteries. Apple says it did that to prevent those iPhones from shutting down unexpectedly. This apology might help on the public relations front, but what about the legal one? Apple's still facing lawsuits from iPhone owners in California, in New York and Illinois. To help sort through this, we're joined by Rory Van Loo. He's an associate professor of law at Boston University with a focus on tech and regulation. Welcome. Rory Van Loo, thank you. Freer, so lawsuits have been filed in all of these different states. Very broadly, what claims are these lawsuits making against Apple? Van Loo, there's contract law claims, which essentially amount to, look, we had an agreement that you, Apple, would do certain things, like take good care of my phone and not slow it down, be transparent in what you're telling me you're doing, and you breached that. There's a second category of claims that amount to essentially you harmed something I own. Whether or not we had an agreement, you went and you slowed down something that I bought from you in the past, and you shouldn't have done that. And then there's a third category of claims that are consumer protection violations. So you did something unfair or deceptive. You changed my phone in a harmful way, didn't tell me you were doing that, and that caused me to go and spend a lot of money on a new phone when, if you'd just been transparent with me about what you had been doing, I could have gone and bought a cheaper battery. Freer, I gather it varies by state, but what do these plaintiffs need to prove for some of these claims? Van Loo, the plaintiffs are going to need to prove for their fraud claims in some jurisdictions that Apple intended to promote new phone sales by slowing down old phones. Freer, that this was some kind of plot, a sales tactic. Van Loo, yes. For all claims, it's going to need to prove some kind of harm. They're going to need to show that Apple intentionally withheld information about slowing down the phone. They're going to need to show that consumers would have made a different decision not to buy a new phone and instead to purchase a lower-priced battery in order to establish harm. Freer, it's still very early in the legal process, but what are the chances that these lawsuits will win against the tech giant Apple? Van Loo, all of the lawsuits face an uphill battle. That being said, if I were Apple, I would be nervous right now. For one, Apple has lost a number of cases across the country on some similar arguments in recent years. Just last month, Apple suffered a setback on an older lawsuit, and in that older case, iPhone 4 users had argued that an Apple software update made their phones buggy and unusable even though Apple had said that the software upgrade would enhance performance. And Apple tried to get that case thrown out before it ever got off the ground and, in its initial response, used one of the arguments that it's likely to make in the current cases, which is, look, we told you in the fine print for the software update that things might go wrong, so we never made any promises. Freer, so is the moral of the story here we better read that fine print? I mean, every time you have an update and you click OK, have we agreed to things that we didn't realize we were agreeing to? Van Loo, yes and no. I mean, Apple is not going to be protected completely by what it puts in the fine print. And the reason is that you have to be very specific about what you say in the fine print. And as far as I'm aware, it didn't anywhere say we may slow down your phones with our updates. Freer, but they did say that now in the apology, that they didn't intentionally shorten the life of a product. Van Loo, Apple's apology this past week is not going to protect them from what they did last month and last year. And so that's the problem that they face right now. I think the apology is going to make some consumers happier, and it's going to help their image in the court of public opinion, if you will. And that's not irrelevant, actually, to lawsuits because judges and juries are human, and so to the extent that Apple is going to appear to be exercising good faith here because of their apology, that's good for Apple, but it doesn't free them of the potential legal liability. Freer, Rory Van Loo is an associate professor of law at Boston University. Thank you. Van Loo, thank you. Transcript provided by NPR, copyright NPR.